They don't push you away with words. They don't need to. They just shift, subtly. When you enter the room, the conversation slows. Laughter dies mid-sentence. Eyes glance, then look away. No one says it out loud, but your presence unsettles something they don't want to face. Not because you're rude, not because you said something wrong, but because you exist too deeply in a world built for surfaces. You notice things others don't. You feel what others suppress. You ask why. In rooms where silence is safer, you speak truths that make comfort tremble. And so, they call you quiet, intense, too serious, too much. But what they really mean is, you don't fit the illusion we're trying to protect. You don't laugh just to belong. You don't agree just to be liked. You don't perform the script. You question the script. And the moment you do, you're not seen as brave. You're seen as difficult, alien. This is how it begins. Not with hatred, not with loud rejection, but with distance. With people slowly backing away, leaving you surrounded but unseen, present but out of place. You wonder, did I say too much? Did I miss a cue? What's wrong with me? But maybe the better question is, what's wrong with the world that punishes awareness? The truth is brutal. In a society addicted to comfort and conformity, clarity is treated like a threat. And those who carry clarity learn early that thinking too much is the fastest path to being alone. It starts early, before you even understand what intelligence is. You're a child, sitting in a classroom, surrounded by noise, motion, and laughter. But something already feels off. You're not above anyone. You're not trying to be different. You just are. While others trade jokes and pass notes, you're staring at the window, lost in thoughts too large for your age. Why do people say things they don't mean? Why do the rules feel fake? Why does everyone act like this is all normal when nothing feels real? You try. You copy their smiles. You pretend to care about the same games, the same gossip, the same empty talk, but it never clicks. And so begins the silent separation, a slow drifting from the group you were born into. You laugh when you're supposed to. You nod when everyone else does. But inside, there's a gap, a disconnection. Like you're watching life through glass. They call it being too shy or too quiet. But it's not shyness. It's the weight of seeing more than you're meant to. It's the burden of asking questions no one else is asking. You notice contradictions. You feel emotional undercurrents that others ignore. You watch people say one thing and mean another, and it haunts you. You're not just in the room. You're analyzing the room, reading between the lines, picking up signals no one talks about. And the worst part? You can't unsee it. You can't go back to being light, to laughing just to fill the air, to speaking without meaning every word. So you begin to pull back, not out of arrogance, but out of exhaustion. You learn, quietly, that depth makes people nervous, that curiosity kills conversations, that honesty kills belonging, and no one prepares you for this. No one warns you that thinking differently comes with a price tag. The cost? Your place at the table, your inclusion in the noise, your right to feel like you belong. This is the first fracture, the beginning of a life lived between connection and solitude, the start of a question that will echo for years. Is it me, or is the world not ready for how I think? If they say you're distant, cold, hard to talk to, but what they never see is how many times you try to explain yourself before you stop trying. You're not avoiding people, you're avoiding disappointment. You've learned that honesty, real honesty, turns faces awkward and eyes away. You've been told you think too much. You take things too seriously. Just relax. But how do you relax when your mind never does? You watch every word, measure every silence, carry every room's energy like a second skin. You feel conversations before you even speak, sensing what can and cannot be said. And so slowly, you begin to edit yourself. You smile to avoid questions. You nod to avoid conflict. You bite your tongue, not because you're unsure, but because you know how much truth people can't handle. They mistake your silence for judgment, your distance for arrogance. But if they only knew how much you've hidden, just to stay close, you've diluted your thoughts, filtered your emotions, softened your truths to protect fragile egos. But no one sees the cost. No one sees the ache that builds when your truest self goes unspoken. You're not trying to be difficult. You're trying to be safe. Because every time you spoke with clarity, someone flinched. Every time you asked a deeper question, someone left. So you stopped showing your mind. You locked your depth behind a smile. You traded being seen for being accepted. But inside, something started to wither. Not because you were wrong, but because being right too often made you alone. This is not arrogance. It's survival, a way to carry your insight without making others uncomfortable. And in that trade-off, you began to vanish from your own life. Not because you wanted to disappear, but because society made it the only way to stay near. They tell you to be yourself. They put it on posters, in movies, in school slogans. But the moment you truly are, they step back. They label you. They ask you to tone it down. This world doesn't reward depth. It rewards performance. In classrooms, the students who memorize without questioning are praised as smart. The ones who ask, "But why?" too many times, they're called disruptive. In meetings, those who stay quiet and smile are good team players. But if you point out inefficiency or challenge the unspoken rules, you're too intense, too negative, not aligned with company culture. We romanticize intelligence as long as it doesn't shake anything. We applaud creativity as long as it colors inside the lines. We say we want innovation, but we punish the innovators who make us uncomfortable, because real intelligence doesn't decorate the system. It questions it. It rewires it. And that threatens those who built their identity on how things are. So society creates a paradox. It celebrates genius in theory and rejects it in practice. You're welcome to be smart as long as you don't make others feel less so. You're welcome to think deeply as long as you keep it light in public. You're welcome to speak truth as long as it doesn't disturb the consensus. This is how the world disciplines brilliance. Not with violence, but with subtle exile. They don't imprison your body. They silence your voice. They don't block your ideas. They ignore them until you stop sharing. And so, the truly intelligent begin to adapt, not by becoming less intelligent, but by becoming less visible. You lower your volume. You water down your words. You hide the very gift that once made you feel alive, just to survive in rooms that weren't built to hold it. This isn't failure. This is the unspoken cost of seeing too much in a world that clings to comfort. Long before social media, long before psychology had a name for your silence, Arthur Schopenhauer saw it. He saw you. A mind too awake, a soul too honest for a world built on pretend. He didn't call it a disorder. He didn't tell you to fix yourself. He gave it a name: intelligence. Raw, unfiltered, isolating intelligence. And then he gave it a sentence: a man can be himself only so long as he is alone. That wasn't cynicism. It was clarity. Because Schopenhauer understood something most never admit, that society is not designed for the deep thinker. It is designed for the agreeable one. It rewards the person who nods, not the one who questions. It uplifts those who follow the script, not those who rewrite it. He believed that real intelligence doesn't just see the world, it sees through it. And that kind of vision comes at a cost, because when you see what others deny, you don't get applause. You get rejection, not because you're wrong, but because you threaten the illusions they survive on. Schopenhauer didn't write for the masses. He wrote for the few, the ones who sit in rooms and feel like ghosts, the ones who watch the crowd and quietly whisper, "This isn't real." And in doing so, he offered something no one else did. Not comfort, not validation, but truth. He didn't promise that it gets easier. He promised that it gets clearer. That the more deeply you think, the more you'll walk alone. But in that solitude, you'll finally meet yourself. He saw intelligence not as privilege, but as burden. A beautiful curse that separates you from the herd, but connects you to reality. In his eyes, your loneliness isn't a weakness. It's a signal that your mind has wandered beyond the noise into the space where truth lives. and where most people are too afraid to go. You never meant to make anyone uncomfortable. You just asked the real question. You just noticed the contradiction. You just spoke the truth that no one else wanted to touch. And suddenly, the room grew colder. People looked down. They changed the subject. They laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was easier than thinking. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't challenge anyone directly, but still, they pulled away. Because here's the hidden rule no one says out loud. Don't think too much. Don't question the script. Don't break the illusion. This is the herd instinct Schopenhauer spoke of, the silent gravity that pulls people towards sameness, not because they are stupid, but because they are afraid. Afraid of standing out. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of seeing the truth and not being able to go back. You became a mirror, and in that reflection, they saw everything they've spent years avoiding: their doubt, their insecurity, their borrowed beliefs. That's why intelligent people are feared, not because they are better, but because they refuse to play along. You don't worship what's trending. You don't repeat what sounds safe. You don't bow to comfort, and that alone is enough to make the group feel threatened. Because thinking differently doesn't just challenge opinions, it challenges identities. An identity is sacred to the herd. It's not about logic, it's about emotional survival. In every community, classroom or office, there is a subtle pressure: conform or be cast out. So when you speak up with clarity, they don't just disagree. They defend, they label, they isolate. You're too much, too intense, not a team player. All because you didn't pretend. All because you dared to see what was real. And yet, this rejection isn't proof that you're wrong. It's proof that you're awake in a world that needs you to stay asleep. The herd doesn't punish you for being dangerous. It punishes you for being honest, because honesty makes the lies harder to hold on to. At some point, you stop fighting, not because you've changed your mind, but because you're tired of defending it. You've learned the pattern. Say what you really think and watch the room fall silent. Share how you really feel and see people pull away. So you begin to shrink. Not physically, but intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. You start holding back your ideas because you've seen how truth gets treated. You censor your curiosity because you're tired of being called difficult. You smile on cue, laugh at things that don't move you, nod to opinions you don't share, just to stay in the room. It's not cowardice. It's survival, a way to exist without constantly disturbing the fragile calm around you. You become a chameleon, smart enough to know when to hide, deep enough to feel the loss of every word you didn't say. And over time, something begins to erode inside, not your intelligence, but your will to express it. Your thoughts pile up but remain unspoken. Your questions burn quietly, but stay unanswered. Your true self retreats, not because you lack strength, but because strength without acceptance becomes exhausting. You wear the mask long enough, you forget the shape of your own face, until one day, someone tells you, you've changed. You don't talk much anymore, and you want to say, I haven't changed. I've just learned what this world does to people like me. But you don't, because you already know they won't understand. This is the hidden tragedy of high awareness. It doesn't always make you rise. Sometimes it makes you disappear, not out of weakness, but out of a quiet, aching wisdom that being understood is rare, and protecting your peace is sometimes more important than proving your point. You're not alone because no one's around. You're alone because no one resonates. You sit in crowded rooms, surrounded by voices, but every word feels distant. You scroll past endless faces, but none seem to see you. You crave something deeper, a connection that doesn't need translation, a conversation that doesn't die at the surface. You don't want attention. You want understanding, not someone who listens, but someone who gets it, without you needing to break yourself down into digestible pieces. But that person rarely comes, and so you start to wonder, is something wrong with me? But the truth is, your loneliness isn't proof of a flaw. It's proof of your depth. Because real depth can't form bonds with masks, and most of what surrounds you is masks. This is the paradox. The deeper your mind, the fewer minds you'll meet. The clearer your vision, the more blurred others become. The more awake you are, the more alien the dreamers around you will seem. People think loneliness is about being unloved, but sometimes it's about being unmatched. A mismatch of frequency, a hunger for resonance in a world that thrives on noise. And you begin to feel like a stranger, not just to others, but to the entire rhythm of human connection. You start avoiding gatherings, not because you dislike people, but because small talk hurts more than silence, because pretending exhausts you faster than being alone. And that's what few understand. Your loneliness isn't a lack of social skills. It's a lack of spaces where your soul fits without shrinking. It's not that you don't want connection. It's that you can no longer afford to fake one. So you sit with your thoughts, alone, but not empty, isolated, but not lost, longing not just for company, but for contact, that rare, electric moment when someone meets you at your depth and doesn't flinch. What if your loneliness isn't emotional, but neurological? A 2016 study published in the British Journal of Psychology found something startling. The more intelligent a person is, the less satisfaction they report from frequent social interaction. For most people, being around friends brings joy, but for highly intelligent minds, too much socializing brings overstimulation, exhaustion, and an aching sense of emptiness. Why? Because most conversations feel like repetition, surface-level exchanges that skim the skin but never touch the soul. You're not antisocial. You're underwhelmed, not by people, but by the shallow form of connection society offers. This isn't arrogance. This is cognitive mismatch. Your mind operates differently, fast, layered, abstract. You notice the tone behind the words. You hear the contradiction inside a compliment. You catch the emotional weight that others skip past entirely, and it wears on you. Imagine thinking 10 thoughts in the space where others think one. Imagine analyzing micro-expressions in real time while still tracking the logic of what's being said. Imagine replaying a single phrase someone used over and over, not because you're insecure, but because your mind won't let it go until it makes sense. This is not social awkwardness. It's neurological overload. Psychologists call it overexcitability, a heightened sensitivity in 5 domains: intellectual, emotional, imaginative, sensory, and psychomotor. In simple terms, you feel more, you think more, you notice more, and that more often leaves you alone. Because while others can glide through small talk, you're sinking under the weight of everything unsaid, and no one sees it. They just say, "You're too quiet, too intense, too in your head." But your silence isn't a void. It's a filter protecting you from a world that moves too fast, talks too loud, and understands too little. This is the science behind your solitude. Not a defect, not a dysfunction, but a rare kind of wiring, one that craves meaning in a world addicted to distraction. You're not just thinking more, you're feeling more, and that's what people never seem to grasp. They see the calm face, the quiet demeanor, the silence you carry so well, but they don't hear the chaos behind your eyes. Because intelligence isn't sterile, it's not robotic or detached. At its core, it's emotional. It's the pain of seeing too much and not being able to unsee it. It's the burden of knowing when someone is lying and pretending you don't. It's the ache of watching people destroy each other over illusions you've already dissected 100 times in your head. You process life in high definition, but that clarity comes at a cost: emotional burnout. You're not just tired, you're soul tired. Tired from carrying thoughts you can't share. Tired from holding space for everyone else's ignorance. Tired from dimming your light so others don't feel small in its presence. Every interaction becomes a calculation. How much of myself can I show before it becomes too much? You've been told you're overreacting, but your nervous system is not broken. It's hyper-tuned. A glance, a word, a shift in tone, you feel it all. Not just intellectually, you absorb it. And no one taught you how to manage that. You internalize the pain of others, question your own worth, and silently crumble under the weight of truths that never had a place to land. The world praises sensitivity when it's poetic, but when it's raw, when it disrupts comfort, it's dismissed as drama. And so, like the intelligent mind, the sensitive heart also learns to hide, to armor itself, to stay quiet, not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. You walk through life like a paradox, hyper-aware and completely unseen. and no one notices until it breaks. Until your silence becomes distance, your burnout becomes apathy, and your emotional brilliance becomes a ghost of what it once was. You didn't lose your passion. You lost the space to express it. At first they admire you. They say you're brilliant, different, impressive. They quote your insights, ask for your advice, praise your clarity, but over time, that admiration turns, it sharpens. It becomes something colder, something quieter, but unmistakable. They start to challenge you in subtle ways, dismiss your ideas, mock your intensity, smile when they say, "You think too much." And you feel it, the shift. They don't hate you, they envy you. Not because you claim to be better. You never said that. You never needed to. Your mind spoke for itself. Your presence reminded them of what they've buried. And the ego? It doesn't like to feel small. This is the curse of being visibly intelligent. You don't need to flaunt it. You just exist. And that's enough. You become a mirror, not of who they are, but of what they're not. And that reflection is painful. It activates something primal. If you shine too bright, I feel unseen. So they dim you, not through open attack, but through withdrawal, passive jabs, and the slow erosion of connection. This is what the Dunning-Kruger effect explains. Those with limited knowledge overestimate their ability because they can't perceive what they don't understand. When someone like you enters the room, someone who sees, who knows, who feels deeply, their illusion of competence begins to crack. And instead of facing that fracture, they blame you for causing it. They tell others you're arrogant, that you think you're better than everyone. But the irony, you never said a word. Their own insecurity did the talking. This is why many intelligent people walk a strange line, loved for what they offer, but punished for offering too much. You become too insightful, too articulate, too aware. And instead of gratitude, you're met with distance. You're not being rejected for your flaws. You're being rejected for your clarity, because clarity isn't neutral. It reveals, and what it reveals, many would rather keep hidden. So, they retreat, not because of who you are, but because of what you awaken in them. This is the most bitter irony. Your presence doesn't hurt people. It just shows them what they've tried so hard to ignore. And that, in a world addicted to self-protection, makes you dangerous. This pain you carry, you're not the first. You're walking a path carved by minds too sharp for the times they lived in. Socrates questioned the comfortable lies of Athens. What did he get in return? Execution. Not for violence, not for crime, but for corrupting the youth with truth. Galileo looked through a telescope and saw that the earth was not the center of the universe. For that, he was sentenced to silence, because his clarity threatened the church's control. Nikola Tesla imagined a future that was centuries ahead. Wireless power, endless energy, but he died penniless and alone, mocked in life, revered only in death. Alan Turing broke the Nazi code, helped end World War II, and was later chemically castrated for being gay. He saved millions and was repaid with humiliation. These are not just stories. They are warnings. Because society doesn't crucify fools. It crucifies visionaries. Not because they're wrong, but because they're early. They arrive before the world is ready, and in their presence, the collective illusion begins to fracture. Their punishment is not always loud. Sometimes it's silence. Being ignored, being left out, being dismissed as too much, too complicated, too difficult. History shows a brutal pattern. Geniuses are rarely accepted in their lifetime. Because genius isn't just brilliance, it's threat. It shifts paradigms. It pulls veils. And people cling to veils like lifelines. So, if you've been made to feel that your depth is a defect, that your questions are disruptions, that your vision makes people uncomfortable, remember this. The world has always rejected those who see it clearly. You're not broken. You're just standing where most refuse to look. And while that view is lonely, it is also sacred. Also, belonging is the dream they sell you. Fit in, blend in, be liked, be invited, be seen. But what they don't say is this: belonging has a cost. And that cost is yourself. You laugh at things that don't move you. You agree with things that don't align. You wear masks layered in silence, just to be part of it. But after a while, you begin to feel it, the numbness, the slow erosion of authenticity, the ache of being in the group but not in the truth, because the connection society offers isn't always real. It's conditional. It thrives on conformity, not understanding, not depth, not resonance. You're expected to be social, but not too thoughtful, funny, but not too honest, successful, but not too independent. We live in a culture addicted to stimulation, not reflection. It rewards likability, not authenticity. It promotes connection as long as it's shallow, fast, and convenient. You scroll past endless photos of smiling faces, group dinners, perfect captions, and wonder, why do I still feel alone? Because belonging has become a performance. And when you refuse to perform, you become invisible, even online, where we were promised freedom. The algorithm punishes nuance. Complexity doesn't trend. Ambiguity doesn't go viral. Depth doesn't sell. So the truly intelligent begin to retreat, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. You stop showing up in places where you have to fragment yourself just to be tolerated. You stop chasing validation in rooms that require your silence. You stop pretending that being surrounded means being understood. And slowly you realize the need to belong is primal, but not at the cost of your soul. Because when belonging demands that you amputate your authenticity, it's not belonging, it's betrayal. So let the crowd pass you by. Let the noise move without you. Because if the price of connection is your self-erasure, it's too high. Most people fear being alone. To them, silence is a threat. Stillness is a signal that something is wrong. But Schopenhauer saw it differently. To him, solitude wasn't punishment. It was liberation. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, because in solitude, you stop performing, you stop shrinking, you stop translating your depth into small talk. You return to yourself, to the questions you were told not to ask, to the thoughts that others found too much, to the truths that silence kept safe. Society wants your attention. It feeds on your distraction, but solitude gives you back your attention, and with it, your freedom. You are no longer shaped by other people's comfort. You are no longer forced to dilute your insight so someone else can feel less insecure. In solitude, your mind is not too much. It's finally enough. Schopenhauer believed that great minds are not made in crowds. They are carved in quiet. Not in applause, but in the echo of your own thoughts finally heard. He wrote, "Great men are like eagles and build their nest on some lofty solitude. Because when you see farther, you need the space to fly. When you think deeper, you need the silence to breathe." Solitude is not loneliness. Loneliness is craving connection and finding none. Solitude is choosing peace over pretense. It's not emptiness. It's clarity. This is the cure that no one talks about. You don't always need more people. You need more truth. And often, truth lives in the places no one else dares to go. So while the world rushes toward the crowd, the noble intellect retreats, not to escape life, but to meet it in its rawest, most unfiltered form. And there, without distraction, without noise, without masks, you begin to understand something sacred. You were never too much. You were simply never meant to live at surface level. There comes a moment, quiet, often unnoticed, when you stop chasing belonging, when you stop explaining, diluting, proving, and in that silence, something shifts. You don't feel rejected anymore. You feel free, free from the need to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding, free from rooms that only welcome you when you're less than who you are. You no longer crave permission. You no longer negotiate your depth for the illusion of connection. This is the turning point. Not rebellion, but return. Return to your own rhythm. Return to your own mind, because solitude, once feared, becomes your elevation. You start seeing the patterns in people's words. You hear the noise behind their certainty, and suddenly, their rejection feels less personal and more predictable. You realize they didn't exile you because you were flawed. They exiled you because you broke the script. You stopped nodding. You asked why. You stepped off the path that was paved in fear and started carving your own through truth. And while the herd travels together, it stays small, tight, safe. But you rise, not because you're superior, but because your soul refuses to shrink. You stop being a mirror for others' egos and start becoming a lighthouse, shining even if no one's looking. You become untouchable, because what can they take from someone who no longer needs their approval? This is the quiet power of the thinker. You lose the crowd, but you gain clarity. You lose comfort, but you gain yourself. And from that height, you don't feel above others. You feel beyond illusion. And you see with brutal, beautiful honesty that the world never rejected you. It simply wasn't built to hold what you carry. If you've ever sat in a room full of people and felt like a ghost, it wasn't because something is wrong with you. It's because something is right. Painfully, brilliantly right. You see the world as it is. Not through filters, not through comfort, but through clarity. And yes, that clarity can feel like a curse. Because when you feel deeply, think relentlessly, and question everything, you will walk alone. Not by choice, by consequence. But understand this. You're not too much. You're not too sensitive. You're not difficult. You're simply awake in a world that survives on sleep. The world mocks what it doesn't understand, and it misunderstands what it fears. That's why people pull away, not from your flaws, but from your depth. You remind them of what they've buried, of what they avoid in themselves. But Schopenhauer would tell you that pain you feel, it's not weakness. It's proof that your mind is wired differently. Proof that you see through the noise. Proof that you're no longer trapped in the performance of fitting in. You were never here to be part of the herd. You were here to observe, to question, to awaken. And that kind of existence is heavy, but it's also honest. So if you feel out of place, if you've been called too intense, too analytical, too strange, wear it as your armor, because only the awake are called difficult by a world built to pacify. Let them misunderstand you. Let them label you. Let them leave, because in the silence they leave behind, you'll find something they never will, yourself. And once you belong to yourself, you no longer need the crowd. You become your own sanctuary, your own compass, your own proof that you're not broken. You're just ahead of your time.